Matt Damon's film career is a lot like a roller coaster. It's got its ups, it's got its downs, and it's even got its moments where you're like, could have been better. However, one film in particular is the perfect example of when the cart derails and goes careening off the tracks, and that being none other than 2017's Suburbicon. This film was first revealed at the 74th Venice International Film Festival, and judging by its trailer, it looked like it was going to be some sort of surreal crime comedy like The Nice Guys or Catch Me If You Can. However, come its release, and we were left with an awkwardly distorted farce of a movie. And after watching it back multiple times, there was really only one thing to blame: how this movie has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And also George Clooney. Or something. Now, story-wise, Suburbicon takes place in a town of the same name that's built up by the introduction to be this perfect utopian society set somewhere in the late 1950s. All the while, a bunch of silliness pursues inside of the town, and it causes our hero, our legend, our boy Matthew Damon, to not really do anything about it. Now, if you went to this movie with the expectation of it being A, a crime comedy like the trailer made us believe, B, a social commentary that reflects on the state of racial violence in our country today, or C, going into more detail about the town of Suburbicon and how something can seem very friendly and innocent on the outside, but uses it as a disguise to hide the true evil it is harboring inside. Well, you'd be wrong in every sense of the word, because the movie is actually about Matt Damon getting the mafia to kill his wife for an insurance scam so he can use the money to run off with his sister-in-law. Only problem is that his son Nicky somehow inadvertently thwarted the plan, and the rest of the movie just has him trying to get his son out of the picture, both physically and figuratively. Without a doubt, this is one of the film's biggest problems. It wasted all the potential it had to make an interesting movie about this perfect utopia, and instead used that said potential on an insurance scam that really wasn't that nice to do. I mean, come on, guys. But this has all been without discussing the B-plot. To sum it up, a black family moves into Suburbicon, and it causes a large group of the community to begin harassing him in the hopes that they'll skedaddle. Now that's all fine and dandy, seeing as how this movie takes place in the 50s, which, as we all know, during this time, mixing together blacks and whites was a big no-no. And surprisingly, when I was doing my research about this film, I learned that this plot was loosely based off an incident in 1957 where a black family in Levittown, Pennsylvania had essentially the same thing happen to them. Only with less Matt Damon. So it's obvious that the writers did put a little bit of effort into this plot to make it somewhat impactful because of it being inspired by actual events in history. The only problem is that this plot isn't given enough screen time for the viewer to actually care about it. Now, I don't know if this was intentional or not to keep this conflict so hidden and scarce as a metaphor for how racism can still exist even if it's not in plain sight, but judging by the coherence of this film, which we'll destroy even more in a bit, so don't worry, I think it's safe to assume that the writers thought, Well, this story right here has Matt Damon and Oscar Isaac in it, so we better keep the spotlight on them. Honestly, if this movie dedicated more time to this plot and developed it better, I would have enjoyed it a lot more because we could have seen Suburbicon in a whole different perspective. Granted, we hardly see or learn anything about the town period because, again, it was undermined by the mobster story and left us with nothing. But by having more knowledge of the setting that seems to have so much going for it, it could have made the movie more fleshed out and given us more of a reason to care. It also doesn't help both the movie and the plot when you come to realize that most of the main characters kinda suck ass in their own unique ways. Garner's a four-eyed nerd who does nothing but frown while looking like he's contemplating something throughout the entire film. Now, his main drawback comes from the fact that he's kind of a terrible human being. From killing his wife for the insurance money, even though they seem to get along just fine, to putting the rest of his family in danger during this exchange. I mean, yeah, he gave the mobsters orders just to overdose his wife, but what was preventing them from doing it to all of them and then looting their house or something? And let's not forget his other characteristics, such as being condescending to other people, most notably Uncle Mikey, who's only trying to be there for Nicky in his time of need, as well as showing no empathy for his son after his mother died, and only tries to get rid of him by sending him off to boarding school, or threatening to kill him when his plan backfires. Truly a man of the ages. Next is Rose, the end result of Julianne Moore finding a movie to co-star in that was worse than Hannibal. Now, Rose suffers from similar problems as Garner does, such as acting very condescending towards other characters, especially Nicky, who at this point is basically everybody's punching bag throughout the entire film. She also seems pretty mentally unstable, seeing as how her first instinct for whenever something goes wrong is to kill someone. For instance, after Oscar Isaac's character exposes Garner for killing his wife for the insurance money, she laces his coffee with lye and gives him quite a tickle in his throat. As well as later on in the climax, when Nicky finally catches on to everything, she decides best thing to do is to kill him as well, and tries to have him overdose on pills she laced in a sandwich. Yeah, and finally, her sense of remorse seems to be at an all-time low throughout the film, which, aside from the whole killing thing, is perfectly amplified by her seeming to not really care that Garner orchestrated her sister's death. I mean, maybe she was a little bummed off screen or something, but from what we see as viewers, her reaction just seems to be a hard, at best. And while most of the other characters aren't as bad as these two, they're either extremely underdeveloped or just boring. The mobsters have little to no other traits except for being brutes who want to kick Garner's ass, and only have like one scene dedicated to just the two of them. The Meyer family could have been more interesting if they didn't just stand around throughout the entire film. Officer Hightower was in the movie for like 2 scenes before completely disappearing after the second act, even though he could have played a decent role in the climax. Oscar Isaac's character is pretty cool, I guess, but he died too quickly and didn't really have time to do anything major outside of scaring the Lodge family. I think the only character I genuinely liked in this movie was Uncle Mitch. He's the only person in the movie who doesn't try and kill someone innocent and actually shows he cares about Nikki. Though he kinda disappears throughout the second act and only shows up at the end to save Nikki but dies in the process. I mean, at least we know he was a good person, but come on. But none of these things come even close to my biggest problem with Suburbicon. There's no goddamn context for anything. Throughout the movie, there'll be countless scenes where something happens without a build-up or an explanation, and it leaves the viewer completely in the dark as to why it played out the way it did, or even if it makes logical sense. In fact, I'm gonna list a few instances that I felt perfectly amplified this problem. Number 1. Why did Rose begin dressing up as the mother? So at the beginning of the second act, Rose begins to dress up as Nikki's mother, i.e. changing her hair to look like hers, wearing her clothes, etc. Now as a sane viewer, I'm desperate to know why she began this transformation into her sister. Was it because Garner told her to? I don't think so, because he killed his wife for the insurance money. Was it because Nikki missed his mother, and so Rose decided to cosplay as her as some sort of coping mechanism? I don't know, and that's gonna be something you're gonna be telling yourself a lot because this movie doesn't explain itself to the viewer. It's just like, oh, you like this story that makes sense and the characters have excuses for doing shit? Well, bam! Not anymore. In fact, I remember when I first saw this movie in the theater. By the time Rose started doing this, it made me realize how nonsensical this movie really is. But I digress. Let's move on to the next example. Number 2. Why did Garner want to kill his wife? Here's another big one I was thinking about during the film. Why does Garner want to kill his wife? Sure, we know he was using it for an insurance scam, but what made him get out of bed one day and think, you know, I really want to kill my wife? In fact, in the beginning of the film, when she's still alive, we see her in a wheelchair and it's explained that it was a result of a car crash Garner got both of them into. So it's hinted that he tried to get her killed this way before getting the mob to do it for him. But still, why did he go through with this in the first place? Were they having relationship problems? Did she know about him and Rose? Again, I don't know. Maybe if the film were to have shown the state of their marriage or their life before Garner began his schemes, then it could have helped us understand why he got her killed in the first place. Number 3. For how long were Garner and Rose secretly in love? In the second act of the movie, it's revealed that Garner and Rose were secretly in love with each other the whole time. Now, while props to Julianne Moore for getting up close and personal with Matt Damon, it doesn't excuse the fact that, again, this comes out of nowhere. And the reason I asked this question is because it could have actually had some bearing on the plot. Like, was this secret affair the reason Garner killed his wife? Did he know she'd eventually find out about it and divorce him, and so Garner killed her as a result? Again, I don't know. I mean, we see Rose is present at their home the night of the murder, but that can only give us so much to speculate on. In fact, later on in the movie, the two talk about their desire to leave Suburbicon and live in Aruba. But this just brings up more questions. I mean, do they want to leave Suburbicon because they know the people are racist? Are people getting suspicious of Garner over something? I don't know. You know, I'm just gonna skip on to the next thing. Number 4. Suburbicon with black people. Okay, this one's a little more far-fetched, but hear me out. So, throughout the movie, we see the people of Suburbicon right in front of the Myers house, as it's clearly established that they don't want them in their town. So while this part is made pretty clear, what isn't so clear is what happens during the movie's first scene, where the mailman is delivering the Myers' mail. During this basically 8-second scene, 2 things struck out at me. 1. When the mailman first begins talking to her, you can tell he's not acting strange even though Mrs. Myers is black. He's delivering their mail with a kind attitude and a smile on his face. However, the second she reveals they're the new neighbors, he gets all awkward and distant during the rest of the interaction. Then floors his James Corden looking ass over to another house and gossips about the new neighbors being black. So judging by this shift in character, does that mean all the people in Suburbicon, I'm gonna assume all the people in Suburbicon for the sake of this point, are okay with black people as long as they don't live in the town itself and instead just work there or pass by on a trip? Because while that may seem a little odd to point out, this segues into the second thing that stood out to me in this scene, and that's these 2 black movers who are helping the Myers settle in. do these two live in Suburbicon as well? Because if they do, which is likely seeing as how their truck says Suburbicon Movers on the front, do they have white people riding in front of their houses as well? Why does the mailman kindly greet them as they pass by? Do they know about the racism that lurks in the town and try to warn the Myers about it to look after their soul brothers and sisters? I don't know. And this may come off as a little nitpicky, but given how the film says "f you" to context, these small details should be pointed out to further prove how much of a mess this plot is. So, those were some of the scenes that stood out to me the most, where the movie just failed to give us an excuse for its events. I mean, there were other instances like, why did Garner tell Nikki at the end not to hang out with Andy anymore? Or why did Garner have to get the mob involved in this whole spiel in the first place? But I think out of every instance in this film, nothing comes close to proving this point more than the scene I'm about to show you. Now, I will say before I play it that this isn't for the faint of heart, and every demonologist who isn't ready for the extreme side of our hero should turn the video off right now. Okay, here we go.
Angel?
Never once in this film is it ever hinted at that Matt Damon likes playing ping pong. Yet it just plops this bombshell of a scene on the viewer, and we're left just speechless as it sucks the last amount of soul from our bodies and leaves us as an empty husk of what we used to be before this. The movie's ending is also pretty lackluster. It just doesn't feel right or conclusive. So what happens is everybody in the A-plot dies except for Garner and Nikki. It eventually leads to this scene, where Garner comes home and threatens to kill Nikki if he tells anyone about this exchange. But unknowingly for Garner, he died of a drug overdose from the sandwich Rose made earlier. So the next day, we see the aftermath of the riot and how everyone is still blaming the Myers for all the violence that has begun erupting through the community. And ends with Andy and Nikki playing catch, showing us that the innocence of children is all that matters. Completely ignoring the fact that nothing is stopping the community from attacking the Myers again, showing there was no resolution in the B-plot. As well as Nikki now being parentless and having no one to take care of him. And the possibility that the mobsters told more of their gang about the situation with his family, and if anything were to happen to them, they should come in as reinforcements and kill Nikki, because he was the only one who made things more complicated in the first place. But again, it's the children that matter the most. Now I could go on and explain why everything else about this movie is horrible, but I feel like I've gotten my point across. Suburbicon was a film that looked good at first glance, but was sadly destroyed by George Clooney's aspiration to make a political statement. Now I can respect he was inspired by the events of William and Daisy Meyer to shape this story, but honestly it falls flat on its face because, again, it was overshadowed by the main story arc. And there are movies out there that did something similar to what went on here. Take for instance, Mississippi Burning. It's also about racism during the mid-20th century and is loosely based off the Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner murder case in Mississippi. Only difference is here the messages about racism are given much more attention because the main characters are a part of that story. They affect the plot both positively and negatively, instead of just sticking around for an hour and a half. It also has a much more satisfying ending where it lets the viewer know that, while the racism hasn't completely gone away in the town, there's still hope for a better future and this was the first step towards it. But to give credit where credit's due, I've watched this film about 4 times since its release. So admittedly, I do find some enjoyment out of Suburbicon. Sure, it's oozing with flaws and is an incoherent mess, but it's able to entertain me in one way or another, and that's something that every film should strive to do. In fact, I'm gonna categorize it as one of my "it's so goddamn stupid it's good" films, alongside Spider-Man 3, Without a Paddle, and Tooth Fairy. Now, I don't know if I'd recommend watching it because I don't want to be liable for you wasting almost 2 hours of your life, but if you need a dose of cinematic retardation, then please be my guest. So if I were to give Suburbicon a rating, I'd give it a very generous light to decent 3 PlayStations out of 10. Watch the film, or don't, I don't care. Here's my pal Chance reacting to the ping pong scene.
Matt Damon.
Okay. Jack! Okay, so what I have for you is, have you ever seen the movie Suburbicon?
No.
Okay, so I have for you a scene from that, which I have made fun of, like, just for like a straight minute in the video. So I'm gonna show you the scene, and there's no context behind it, because there's no context for anything. So I'm just gonna give you the scene, and I want you to watch it.
Of course.
I want us to do it at the same time, so I'm gonna give it to you through Discord. And I want you to watch it. And tell me when you're ready, and then we'll do it together, okay?
Alright, ready. Mayfield Academy.
That's Matt Damon's son, by the way.
Fucking looks like the human version of Nemo from Finding Nemo.
Watch out. It's not tense.
What kid pulls out a knife when he hears like noise?
Well, in this kid's defense, he did kind of get like attacked by mobsters, but
What?
yeah. Okay, I'll explain it to you later. You gotta watch this part.
Into the basement?
Jack, shut up! Watch! This is the best part.
Why is there fog in his basement?
You'll see.
That's the real monster. Angel.
What do you think?
I'm gonna start playing MVM again.
Jack, I'm sorry, but just seeing Matt Damon beat his wife with a ping pong paddle is really funny.
Also, I fell asleep around yesterday, and so you call Raptor to harass me.
Yeah.
I wake up, there's 12 messages on my phone. You're a monster. I'm not gonna talk to you for another 6 months.
Okay. No.
You're a monster. I was just like, why is there fog in his basement? The dad's just like shagging his wife with a ping pong. I don't. What? No.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Up yours, Matt Damon.